Hello, everyone, and welcome to this edition of The Future is Here. And today, I'm really delighted to have with me Diego Casaravilla from Argentina, so from a whole other part of the world than we've been talking to recently. Diego, welcome, and thank you so much for taking some time to talk with us today.
Thank you, Finn. It's a pleasure.
Diego, you are both the owner, founder, and managing director of Fine Research and Fine Panel. Can you tell us a little bit about the company and in how many countries you are in Latin America and the sort of business that you do?
Sure. We basically do field work. We've been doing field work for the last 20 years. That's when the company was founded. And we just do Latin America. We want to be expert just in one part of the world. So we sometimes get a request for doing something in other parts, and we just say no. We are just focused in this particular region, and we're happy to be just focused here in Latam. And we have offices in Brazil, in Mexico, in Argentina, in Colombia, Chile, and Uruguay. And we cover other countries also, I mean, through reliable partners. But that's what we do. We have been changing our focus over the last decade or so. And we have been more strongly focusing healthcare, which is probably 70% of the business, but not exclusively. So we still do a lot of consumer and B2B stuff. And about a decade ago, we founded our own medical panel, which today is the only Latin American panel. Of course, there are other global, I mean, when it talking about HCPs, there are, of course, other global panels, but when it comes to just local Latin resources, we are still the only one that's working as a panel. Of course, there are a number of people that can recruit doctors, qualitative. I mean, that's a large pool, but focusing in as a panel and with doctors in Latin, we are so far the only company focused on that.
So, I mean, amazing. Not only healthcare professionals, but also fieldwork, which is kind of an interesting connection then to my next question, because of course, you know, the last year has been COVID and the most busy people have been healthcare professionals, and fieldwork must have been very challenging in that time. So how did your business survive? How did it cope with the year of COVID in 2020?
Yeah, answering your question, there's like two different bases of what's going on with healthcare specifically and with the rest of the business. We were quite lucky actually to be focused in healthcare and also in digital. So that helped us to suffer a little bit less than maybe the average in the region. However, if we compare what's happened with the consumer stuff, that really was really hit. And checking the numbers, last year for us it was like 20% less to a regular year. And but if we check the consumer stuff, it's less than half or less than that. So it was quite affected. I think something interesting, however, is if you check the numbers and just the invoicing, that could be 20% less. But if you check the amount of jobs, that keep quite steady, which I think it has an interesting interpretation for the market. It is, okay, there was obviously less budget last year to do whatever was needed in market research, but there was not less need to do market research. So companies were trying to do the most they could, maybe with less money, but still they were interested in doing market research stuff. So I think the good news for us is that what we provide is something that the market needs. They could have for circumstantially less money to spend over the last year as with all kind of services, but we have a very good chance of have a quick rebound when things get more stabilized. So I think that's something that I look at the numbers and see that. And this first quarter, actually, we're seeing that we're already better. We're already seeing that in our company. This first quarter, Q1 was better for us than Q1 of 2020, which was entirely or almost entirely a pre-pandemic quarter. So I would say that some areas are recovering, and our healthcare business is better than what it was last year. The consumer stuff, of course, and B2B stuff, it's much slower, and I guess that's going to keep on that pace for a long time.
So, I mean, that's an interesting point that you made, that quarter one this year is better than quarter one last year. But at the end of, assuming that 2021 continues with that promising outlook, do you think you will have recovered completely the 20% that you were down last year this year, or will it take more than 1 year to get back to those previous levels?
I mean, it's very uncertain what's happening next, and the world is really having different paces, and LATAM is really probably lagging compared to the rest of the world in terms of, or comparing at least to the US and UK, and Europe is also maybe struggling to get the vaccines, but I think you will certainly recover before than LATAM, parts of Asia and Africa, obviously. So I don't know. It's hard to tell when the region or when the companies in our space are going to be fully recovered. I would think for us that we are probably going to be, or are already in the same cruise speed that we were before the pandemic. But that's, again, the team and the company did a fantastic job, and that's part of the merit. And second, we were very lucky to be focused in areas that were really not hit by the pandemic as others. And you also have a question before regarding how field was affected, and it was quite well. I mean, if we check the response rates we had with doctors, and I had to just make an exception with those doctors extremely focused in COVID, like were working on intensive therapy or pulmonologists. Of course, those were harder to get, but the rest of the doctors were very available. In fact, they use market research as a replacement of their reduction in income as caring for patients. I mean, if you were maybe an oncologist, you were seeing less patients than in a normal year. So you have more available time, more spare time to take part of market research. So we've seen that the response rates come in very nicely, in some moments even better than a regular year, and now are about the same as any other year.
Well, I mean, that's a wonderful story. It's fantastic news to hear. When, I think back to some of the early projections that we were looking at the beginning of the pandemic last year, and I think a general feeling was that markets and sectors would be down by 30% or more. But it's wonderful to hear that, stories like yours where actually it didn't get that, it didn't hit those levels, and that the road to recovery is looking more positive, which is great to hear.
Yeah. Just go ahead, please.
No, I was just going to concentrate a little bit more on some of the some of the changes in work practices, I guess, Diego. Many people would say that in markets like the US, working from home was something which was more obvious in the past. It maybe wasn't quite as obvious in Europe or indeed in Asia. And I want to talk to you a little bit about that as well in Latin America. If people did have to work from home over the last year, do you think they'll stay working from home? Is the amount of time that people will spend out of the office going to stay as it is, or do you think everyone will want to go back to the office as soon as possible?
Well, I can tell the story in my company. The popular vote is obviously, I'm very positive to stay working at home. I mean, of course, for there's a self-protection reason as the basic reason now, but people have learned to enjoy working from home, and I think we are very hard to have a hard time if we were telling everyone, okay, now you have to go back 8 hours, 5 days a week at the office. I think that we shall imagine the future, at least in our company, with some kind of much more flexibility than what we had before, and that's going to stay in. The final mix, I mean, it's hard to tell. I think there are some things of the physical thing that are relevant. First, to get the sense that you are part of a team, while it's possible, or with all the digital platforms and everything. I'm not saying it's not possible. We have done that for over a year now, but it's not the same. I mean, having the chance now and then, and I'm not saying every day and 8 hours, but having the possibility to have in-person meetings, it's not replaceable to get the sense of belonging, I would say, that you are part of a company. That's the first thing. The second thing that I think in person really helps is training new members. We have kept basically frozen all the stuff we had with a couple of new hires now, but so we didn't have that demand for training. But obviously, I mean, the market is going to be dynamic, and we will need to train more people, and so training. Digitally, it's not impossible, of course, but it's not the same. And I think for that, I think in the future, I'm thinking some kind of mix of in-person and flexibility and working from home a number of days. I mean, and I think that's going to stay in the world. Interestingly, I was reading yesterday that the giants like Amazon, Google, and other companies are thinking of going back to the office as a good idea. I mean, they were the pioneers of this work from home. So, I mean, the future is really not completely certain on this point, I think. But on our company, we're thinking of some kind of mix. And it's difficult to make any plans because, I mean, the pandemic is still quite active in Latam. Vaccinations are really coming very slow. Brazil, Argentina, Mexico, and Colombia, the countries that we mainly work are. I mean, it's not possible today to think of a safe return to the office, and I think it's probably hard to think about that for the rest of the year. But we'll see. I mean,
No, and I sympathize, even though we may be a little bit ahead here in Europe. I know that here in Holland, for example, the vaccination program is also quite slow. So I can fully sympathize with the challenges, if you like, that brings. On a related point then, Diego, I mean, if the amount of working from home is going to increase, will that also mean that fine research will have to kind of review the amount of office space that it has, the sorts of investment that it makes into fixed costs going forward? There's a school of thought that says companies have to make their costs much more variable and get rid of all the fixed overheads that they have had. Is that something that's on your agenda for review in the coming year then as well?
Well, yes and no. Yes, we have get rid of maybe some secondary rented space. In Chile, for instance, we have a place which was basically a focus group room and an extra office. Of course, that is now completely useless because we didn't make any physical focus group for over a year. So we got rid of that rent, and the people working there are working entirely from home. But when it comes to fixed costs, which is our main fixed cost, it's not really office rentals. The critical fixed cost is the people that you work with, is the full-time staff that is with you. And we have made a decision to do whatever it takes to keep that team, and we keep everyone, even the cleaner, which is getting the salary without cleaning a single thing over the last year. I mean, we're keeping the staff because we believed it's something we had to do. But it's not just an ethical question, it's also a question of survival. I mean, keeping a talented and consistent staff is critical for every business. So this is our main fixed cost, and we're willing to keep it as it is. Of course, you can have some people working from home or with a more flexible contract, but basically it's full-time employees you need there, and you need to guarantee work for them, and that's something we're keeping. I think the outsourcing, it was already here in the industry before the pandemic, and it's very strong. So I think it's going to be relevant, but probably not now. And if you think of what happened during the pandemic, it happened something opposite to outsourcing. With companies with less work, what they mainly were doing is trying to outsource as less as possible to keep your own internal team as busy as possible. So I think the outsourcing is going to be much relevant, but not now. When we're start to seeing growth, many companies are saying, okay, I'm going to be more cautious. I prefer to grow by outsourcing, by alliances, by association with other companies, rather than putting more fixed costs in terms of more staff that you are having your payroll. So I don't know. I might be wrong, but I think it's not happened. We're seeing the other trend. We are seeing many jobs that we were doing in the past entirely, and then we have the clients say, okay, but I will moderate that, or I will. So they want to try to do part of the jobs on their end that when they were previously outsourcing that. But we'll see. We'll see what's coming next.
Interesting, interesting. And as you know, I do sympathize, I think, with anybody who's probably started a job this year, as you mentioned a little bit earlier about the training. You know,
Right.
you sit in a room and you meet your company over a screen, and you know, how do you do that? And whether you're part-time, full-time, that whole sense of community and company ethos is very difficult to get. So.
Yeah. Yeah.
So switching sides of the coin a little bit, Diego. Have you seen, and you mentioned this earlier in terms of the demand, how have you seen client demand change or evolve, since the pandemic has started?
Um, well, I think there's a stronger sense of partnership, or the need of partnerships in the relationships. It could have happened that companies would decide just go to a more open market model of hiring or procurement, and there are some platforms that you can, I mean, get into there, and there's like auction for the best price and the best bids, and many companies still have that model. But I think that the winning model is the other one: create special relationships, create partnerships of companies and vendors that you feel that they are trusted, could be trusted, or trustworthy. And I think that's the direction we are seeing more clearly. No, not just an open market where everything is bid on every project. Of course, bidding and quoting is part of our lives, but just within a set of pre-qualified companies that have some sense of partnerships. And I think that's going to be the trend. It's harder for the startups to enter in a market where there are this kind of existing partnership relationships, but for the established companies could be an advantage.
Again, interesting. So that it becomes a short list of trusted suppliers, if you like.
Right. Yeah.
You raise an interesting point, which I hadn't really thought about, which is, have you seen that level of trust? Has that become more important in the relationship and the partnership between the client and the provider?
Yeah. I think, you recently had this webinar called Transformation and Trust, which I had the pleasure to take part of. And I think it was an excellent idea to put the focus on trust. I think trust, it's everywhere. It's in the relationship also with the clients, and even with the employees. I mean, going back to your earlier point, think we were forced to trust overnight. Say, okay, you have to trust your team that they are going to be doing the same quality job, even from working from home. And I'm delighted to say they did a wonderful job on that end. I recall something that happened last month, that it was someone from the office in Sao Paulo writing an email at 3 a.m. to someone in the office in Montevideo. As I was seeing that the day after. And then 10 minutes later, the guy from Montevideo, 3 a.m., was replying to someone in Sao Paulo. I mean, I don't expect people to do that. I mean, that was something that happened. But it's showing the kind of commitment that was possible. And in all honesty, I don't know if I would have trusted people and say, okay, now let's work everyone from home, and that was going to work right well. I mean, we were forced to trust, and I would say that the people in the company, and I think it's not just valid for us, but for the great majority of workers globally in the industry, that they were up to the challenge, and they responded quite well. So sorry, I think
No,
I did.
listen. What a lovely compliment to you and the business to hear that story about writing emails at 3 o'clock in the morning. So I think that's fantastic.
Right.
Because we are working remotely, Diego, to a much greater degree than in the past. Again, a number of commentators have said that, as a result, this year is probably going to be the year of the platform. Now, I'm always a little nervous with that comment because I remember it was the year of the mobile for at least 10
Right.
years, I think, when it came out first. But there is a certain logic, I guess, in thinking, yes, platforms allow you to access lots of different things at different times. Would you agree with that? Do you think this is going to be the year of the platforms and that it'll be important to have one in order to help the business grow?
Well, as you said, it was before. We were already in the age of the platforms. I was looking at the term history, and it was a term I did back to 2015 or so. So it's been in the air for some time already. Yes, but you have the more important thing is to realize what's the pace of the platforms in the specific space you are. For instance, for us in the market research industry, it's really, it was a very quick shift overnight that you have to use any platform. Otherwise, you were there. Imagine you were doing qualitative if you don't have a platform to replace your focus group room. You didn't have any chance to do anything. So a lot of companies that were previously doing traditional qual, they had to overnight shift to a platform to just to survive. And that happened quite well. Qualitative really is keep on working in at least in Latam, and I guess worldwide, just using this kind of platform. That's a good example. On the quant side, the process was done earlier, so we were already relying on platforms for most of our quant research, not everything, but for a large amount. So the process happened actually earlier. But you have to think what's the pace in different industries. And I was thinking, for instance, in the research we have been doing with doctors, this year we decided to run, when we faced the initial of the pandemic, and we say we need to do some research to keep ourselves relevant and to show that what we are doing is useful. We decided to run a number of tracking study with doctors around different COVID issues. The last one about vaccinations that we released a couple of weeks ago. And so the idea to do that was to show that, and before that I want to thank Esomar because it was a great partner, and the Esomar Foundation really helped us to do that. But what's interesting is when we were asking during all these tracking waves if doctors were using the platforms, we got a yes, but it was mainly that Brazilian doctors, for instance, were mainly carrying patients by in-person means, even in the middle of the worst of the pandemic. And when they were thinking about other platform, the main other platform is the telephone. It's not really a platform. And when you go to the specific healthcare platforms, they were using, of course, Skype or WhatsApp. But when they go to the specific platforms for telemedicine, they were loved, but they were not really much used. It was a small percentage that they were using those. And another question we had also in that tracking was asking about the sales representatives of the pharmaceutical companies. Would you prefer to reach them in person, or would you prefer to keep as it is now by some kind of online means? And we were shocked to see how much they were asking for the return of the in-person visit of the sales representative. And I think it's the same for associations like Esomar. If you check LinkedIn, there's so much thirst for the possibility of having an in-person, real meeting and grab some beers and share some stories, do all that gossiping that is part of our business. And it's harder to do it in Zoom or another way, but you can do it in person much easily. So I think the pace is different, and then there is still a strong space for in-person relationships in the future.
I think you're right. We are social animals, so I think when we're deprived of that social interaction, we go back into our shell a little bit and can only hope that hopefully someday we can do it again very, very quickly. Clearly, Diego, the last year has been a challenging one. Hopefully, even though it's a while still, but vaccinations are on the horizon. So hopefully business conditions will become a little easier as we move towards that horizon. But do you have any sense of what that next challenge might be? What's the next, I mean, tsunami might be too strong a word, but do you see anything on the horizon that might still pose us a challenge in our sector as we try and leave COVID behind?
Well, I think you just need to be prepared for the unexpected. Before the pandemic in the region, we faced some other black swans like the earthquake in Mexico or other things that were, I mean, very relevant at a local level. And you really cannot anticipate what is going to be the black swan, but you can anticipate that there will be, or there might be. It's likely that you're going to have a black swan, so you have to prepare for the unexpected. I think that's what I would suggest. It's very hard because how you prepare to something you're not expecting, but I think that we have learned quite a lot from this situation. So.
And I think we've proved our flexibility too, no? So let's hope we don't have to use it too much in the future. But
let's go. Absolutely.
So just to switch the emphasis again, just a little bit, Diego. You and I have been in this business for some considerable time. So imagine that somebody at the moment decided that they wanted to open an office in Latin America. They've no idea where. They're not quite sure what the circumstances are. What would be your one piece of advice to them as they look at the region now to set up in?
Well, I think for LATAM you have to think in the long term. I mean, the ups and downs are not just something that happened with the pandemic. I mean, we're used to the ups and downs and crises and recoveries. The cycles are much more common than in Europe or in the US, and are coming increasingly shorter. So you have to live with that and accept that. In some sense, we were better prepared, I think, those having experienced these ups and downs in LATAM to cope with the current situation, because it was not completely new that we have to see this reduction and rise again. So I think you have to think in the long term. Don't believe the cycle. When it's going down, it might go up, and when it's going up, don't believe either the cycle, because you have to be prepared for the downturn. So I think if you think in the long term, I mean, there are a number of companies working here and doing business and surviving, and it's possible. So I think there are opportunities, but you don't have to think of the short term. You will face a lack of financing. We will face the domestic markets sometimes get too small. You have to go outside or the other way around. So I mean, you have to be extremely flexible, of course. But if you focus in the long term, if you have a specific and valid proposition, I think that would work well for everyone that has really a succeeding proposition. I mean, it's not for everyone, and it's not easy, but it's a market as any other, and it's dynamic, which is also good. I mean, it's a very dynamic market, so you may find opportunities that it could be harder to get sometimes in a more mature market.
And I guess, the same question, but with a slightly different focus. If you were to meet a young entrepreneur at the moment in any of the markets that you're currently operating in, who had a great idea of some technology-based research app or whatever, but with no knowledge again of the sector, what would be your one golden nugget to tell this young entrepreneur as he's coming into our sector?
I was looking at when we started the pandemic, there was an event that you organized that was Esomar from home, and I participated on that, and I checked back what I wrote at that time for discuss with one of the panels. That was exactly 1 year ago, April 2020. And I put some notes of what were some tips for everyone. It was not really for a startup, but for anyone trying to work. And so points where we need to research. We don't need to froze ourselves. We need to freeze ourselves. We really need to not to wait for the old normal to come back. I mean, that was something we were saying at the start, and we were expecting that it was we're discussing about 2 or 3 months, not a year or more than a year. So I think that's still relevant. So we have to not to think that the old traditional lives is going to come back exactly as it was, because it's not going to happen. To keep relevant, that was another tip. I mean, keep relevant means maybe it's not a time for making a lot of money. It's a time for showing what you do and try the world to understand what's your proposition. It's a moment to create relevance, to create awareness, and once things get calmer, I mean, you will have your shot. And another thing I put there, and I think that's valid in any time, put in your client's shoes. That's probably number one suggestion. Think of in terms of a buyer. And but overall, I would say it's a combination. Come with the idea you're passionate about and work with that idea, but at the same time, be flexible to confront what the market is returning you. Be prepared to face the naked truth of maybe some of the ideas you have were not exactly what the market is demanding, and be flexible to adapt. So I think that you can do both things. You can go very bold with the idea that you have, and at the same time be prepared for changing, and don't be afraid of proposing something that could not be going in the same line of what everyone is talking. And for instance, we have done something that is very counterintuitive now, is when all companies were restricting financing and were trying to delay payments to vendors and everything, we decided to change the payment terms we have with our doctors. Typically, we were paying before that in a 4 weeks time. So we said, there's an opportunity here to do something that maybe is unexpected, but it could work, and say, doctor, we're going to pay you overnight. So once they complete the survey, they go into a platform that initiates the payment process, that it would take 24, 48 hours. Everything is automated. And of course, that involved a lot of money that you were putting up front, because I mean, the money you were expecting to pay in 4 weeks time, you have to put it up front. But we had very good results, because imagine the doctor that was in the middle of the pandemic, being bombarded by calming. They need to calm the anguish of the patients, with less work, with less. More importantly, they felt very pretty much with the anxiety of getting infected and the risk of getting infected, and with the social insurance plans telling we're not going to paying you because we need to delay a little bit our payments, or they're not recognizing when you are doing the virtual consultation work you are doing. So, and we said them, okay, we're going to pay you now instead of 4 weeks. So we got a very positive feedback, and we did not, I mean, we have not done this because we are nice people, but it really worked, because we got a better response rate, and it was an investment in engagement. So what I'm saying here is, if you have a good idea, even if it could be not following the natural wisdom of your environment, but if you are convinced and it makes sense, go bold with it, go and go forward. And of course, if it doesn't work, then think another one, and be flexible enough to change and think another thing again. So I mean, that's what I think.
It's that lovely phrase: it fail fast and fail often, so that you eventually get to the secret recipe. Diego, thank you. I mean, it's always a pleasure chatting, but it's so interesting to learn of how different businesses have reacted in different ways depending on how the pandemic has affected the region. So thank you for spending the time with us today. It's been a hugely interesting discussion.
No, thank you. It was a pleasure, and I hope, I mean, this is helping anyone out there thinking about entering into our business. It's a lovely work to do. So we hope we got more people interested, and young people coming into market research. So thank you very much.
No, thank you. Well, so thank you all for those of you that joined us today to watch the interview. If you do have any further questions for Diego, then you can send them to my email address, which is either at the bottom of the screen or which will follow in a second, and I'll be sure to pass them on to Diego, and he can get back to you with whatever questions or the answers to whatever questions you may have. So I will leave it at that for this week. Thank you all for joining me, and look forward to seeing you the next time. And thanks again, Diego. Fantastic conversation.
Thank you, Finn. It was a pleasure.